I'm a real live wire. Psycho killer. Qu'est-ce que c'est? Fa 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 fa. Better run, 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 run away. Oh, psycho killer. Qu'est-ce que c'est? Fa 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 fa. Better run, 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 run away. Oh,
try and be a little bit more, not conversational, that's not quite the right word. What's the word I'm searching for today? I want to have chats rather than debates, at least to start with. Because if I say to you, pick between a rock and a hard place, that's not really a debate, is it? It's an invitation to have a conversation about which is the lesser of two evils. In this case, Dominic Cummings and Boris Johnson, because the former has revealed more evidence of the latter's absolute abnegation of anything remotely resembling a sense of duty in the context of tackling the coronavirus. So that would be the moral corruption. Then, of course, you have the incompetence that is now writ large across our islands, and most obviously and most recently in the context of opening up the clubs at midnight yesterday, and a few hours later, announcing that actually come September, you're going to need proof that you've had 2 vaccinations, 2 jabs, before you can go into a club. We'll try and work that one out in a way that once again will at least pay lip service to the notion that it isn't just a complete skip fire. And if it's not safe to go into a club without 2 jabs in September, how can it be safe to go into a club without 2 jabs tonight? You see? And I think we've all probably reached a point now where we stop thinking, maybe we're missing something here. Do you know what we are? Do you know what our problem is? We're too nice. That's our problem. Keep thinking, it can't be as bad as it looks. Too optimistic, too upbeat. Keep thinking, don't be ridiculous. You remember the flesh-coloured body stocking I spent most of last year wanging on about? Actually, it was the year before. It was pre-COVID, wasn't it, the flesh-coloured body stocking? It was the idea that people still insisting that the B word was going to be a brilliant thing could possibly be aware of things that the rest of us couldn't see. And now you've got Lord Frost standing up in public and saying, that deal I told you was brilliant. Oh, it's awful. But I blame the other lot. Incredible scenes unfolding all around us. So the incompetence on the question of how it can be a good idea not to let people into nightclubs without 2 jabs in September, but a great idea to let people into nightclubs without 2 jabs tonight. We'll try and wriggle our way through that one. With also, I can't remember whether we've ever done this or not together, just the philosophical objection to it. It's been a while since I went clubbing, and it's been even longer since I was asked to prove my age before getting into an over-18s venue. But it still happens, you know. It still happens. Even in Sainsbury's, you can be asked to prove your age. So why not have to prove your vaccination status? You can talk me through perhaps the elements of that conundrum that I'm currently missing. But let's start with Cummings, and I mean it, a conversation rather than a debate. There's not really a lot to debate. I appreciate that many people, millions of people, you know, according to the opinion polls, well over half still of people polled are still broadly supportive of the current regime, or at least of the current leader. I'm never quite sure how to separate those two things. So the old Trumpian observation about being able to shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and not lose a single vote has sort of come home to roost on a scale that I suspect even the Orange Man-child never could have imagined. You now have it was about 6 months after he was hospitalised. He was in intensive care with coronavirus after just shy of 60,000 people had died from it. You have the Prime Minister telling his closest advisors and his key allies that he didn't really buy the idea that the NHS could be overwhelmed, and he'd gone off the idea of lockdowns. This reportedly caused a 6-week delay last autumn between when the scientists wanted it to be done and when Boris Johnson finally accepted that it needed to be done after, as I say, opining, and it's on the record this, Cummings has released the receipts, so to speak. I told you a while ago, didn't I? It would all depend on what receipts he'd kept. His word versus Johnson's word is, it's an almost laughably inadequate tension now, isn't it? It's who are you going to believe, Dominic Cummings or Boris Johnson? The bloke who stuck the lie on the side of the bus or the bloke who drove it? I mean, it really is an incredible challenge that you've got there. So it was all going to depend on the receipts. But of course, the Fifth Avenue principle teaches us that even if he's kept the receipts, it doesn't really matter. Doesn't it? Even if he's kept the receipts, it doesn't really land. I suppose you've got the Dominic Cummings precedent with regard to Barnard Castle, but this latest development showing that he was sort of subscribing to the idea that because the average age for people who died was in the low 80s, then somehow lockdowns were unnecessary and we could just sacrifice the maximum of 3 million people in this country aged over 80 in order to ensure that everybody else could go about their business. Now, the weirdest bit of this is the fact that 6 months before he'd been put into intensive care himself with a very, very serious case of coronavirus. That's the bit I can't quite compute. You come out of hospital. I think one of the nurses that he praised for looking after him has already left the country as a result of what I suppose we'd have to call the hostile environment. You're banged up in ICU with a really severe, life-threatening case of coronavirus, and 6 months later, you're saying to your closest buddies, "Oh, I don't buy this nonsense about the NHS being overwhelmed," and also, never mind the lockdowns. It's only the really old people that are dying. Let's just let it rip through the population and see what happens. Let the bodies pile high. That phrase has never been denied either. But I can't believe it. Because I don't talk about much anymore outside work. I kind of talk about the weather like you do and the tennis until quite recently, and obviously the football. So sometimes I get to work and I get my ducks in a row at 10 o'clock in the morning, and I can't quite believe the quacking. I genuinely can't believe the quacking. So that little throwaway line just there, let the bodies pile high, which was among Dominic Cummings' previous revelations, never been denied. And today, they haven't denied all of it. They've denied everything that isn't written down, in the same way that they'd steal everything that isn't nailed down. So what you have today is this. He wrote this. Hardly anyone under 60 goes into hospital, but he did. And of those, virtually all survive, and I no longer buy all this NHS overwhelmed stuff. We will, I suspect, this hour, take some calls from people working in the NHS to tell me whether last October, I think it was, were you buying the idea that the NHS could be overwhelmed when you were up to your ears in coronavirus cases? How can he come out of an ICU ward and 6 months later start claiming, it's almost as if he's claiming that black is white, right? That the moon is made of cheese, that the earth is flat. So we'll have a look at that. And I mean, if you have been seduced into the fetishizing flags and the prioritizing statues over human beings, if you've fallen for that school of thought lately, then how do you feel about the fact that he was planning to go off and infect the Queen? Potentially. Are you cool with that as well? Because that's also in Dominic Cummings' latest revelations. 18th of March last year, according to Cummings, the Prime Minister said, "I'm going to see the Queen. That's what I do every Wednesday. Sod this. I'm going to go and see her." Cummings claims he intervened, pointed out that he could infect her, at which point, he added, "I just said to her, if you give her coronavirus and she dies, what are you going to do? You can't do that. You can't risk that. That's completely insane." And the Prime Minister said he basically just hadn't thought it through, and then said, "Yeah, you're right, I can't go." I struggle for words. Unfortunately, it's my job to come up with them, but this is just absolutely unbelievable. Patrick Vallance, Chris Whitty, Dominic Cummings, all pushed for tougher restrictions from mid-September. And Johnson said, no. That's an old house track, isn't it? There's no limit. I don't know. Did he say that? No. I'm not doing it, he said. And when asked to explain why, he referred to the Daily Telegraph as being his real boss. You'll remember the Daily Telegraph used to pay him £250,000 a year for a weekly column, money that he described as chicken feed, and that he appeared to be prioritising the opinions of the headbangers and nutcases that write comment pieces for the Daily Telegraph over the advice of the Chief Medical Officer and the Chief Scientific Advisor. I might go home now. I mean, seriously, you see what I mean about not having a debate? How can you debate any of this? It's there, it's on the record. And yet, doff cap, tug forelock, Boris is doing his best. Should we have a little listen to what Dominic Cummings has had to say before we have a little chat about how we feel, what we are thinking about the latest invitation to choose between the rockiest of rocks and the hardest of hard places?
His attitude at that point was a weird mix of partly it's all nonsense and lockdowns don't work anyway. And partly, well, this is terrible, but the people who are dying are essentially all over 80. And we can't kill the economy just because of people dying over 80.
So we've got a problem here. Do we discuss the substance of what is alleged, or do we discuss almost the, I don't want to use the word gossip because it is really important, or do we discuss the chemistry of it? Because I lean towards the chemistry of it at the moment for the reason I've just explained to you. There's no debate here. It's absolutely disgusting. It's depraved what he said. And if you are being primed to pretend otherwise, I can't help you. I can't reach you. If you're listening to this from an actual Prime Minister of this country 6 months after coming out of ICU, claiming that he doesn't believe the NHS is in danger of being overwhelmed and he doesn't want to have a lockdown, God knows how many people died as a result, a direct consequence of that delay. Never mind got seriously ill or sustained long COVID. It's like debating with, well, as I say, it's like debating with flat earthers or QAnon type people. And there is quite a lot of crossover there, I think. But not enough. There's plenty of people who, in most circumstances, would be considered decent and sensible who are still on board the good ship Johnson. So the Cummings angle fascinates me. I'm tempted to ask you really easy questions this morning, just to get the ball rolling. Most obviously, does it land? Does it land? They'll be queuing up to describe Dominic Cummings as bitter and vengeful, which is true. He is bitter and vengeful. And I really struggle with his revelations, largely because he was in the room where it happened and he did nothing. He sat on his hands while all this was going on. So in an attempt to sort of rebrand himself as some sort of moral arbiter, it's laughably pathetic for Dominic Cummings to sort of seek to cast himself. And he may claim that he's not doing this. I don't know. I haven't spoken to him personally. But he certainly is giving the impression of somebody who is seeking the moral high ground by revealing how amoral the government was, the Prime Minister was, in the heart of a national crisis. But he was there. He wasn't just in the room where it happens. He was largely in charge of agendas and policies and ideas. And, you know, he didn't walk the plank, did he, until December, was it, of last year? It was certainly at the end of last year. He was in the room where it happened. God, I can't wait to see Hamilton. And I don't know how much that matters to you. So let's start with this then. First of all, straight up, it's 10:15. Phone lines are open, 0345 6060 973. I just would like to know what you make of Dominic Cummings' latest revelations. Straight up. No complications, no priming, no complicated analysis necessary. What do you make of it? This is the latest tranche of evidence that Boris Johnson has the morals of an alley cat. Actually, that's probably a little unfair on alley cats. What do you make of the latest revelations? Obviously, if you lost somebody, particularly in the median average age group, you're going to be a little bit upset by the idea that Boris Johnson thought that was a price worth paying to keep Wetherspoons open. But what do you make of it? 0345 6060 973. And with your permission, can we talk about Cummings? What do we think of Dominic Cummings? What do you think of him? Because I'm, again, in a little bit of cognitive dissonance. He is more responsible than anybody else in this country for debasing objective truth, for creating an environment in which people like Ian Duncan Smith were heralded as wise and sagacious. I know that Dominic Cummings doesn't consider Ian Duncan Smith to be wise and sagacious. He used to work for him and described him in the most damning of terms. But that's not the point, is it? The lies that were needed to get Brexit over the line began with Dominic Cummings. So he created this environment where nobody trusts anything that anybody says. And yet now he's asking you to trust him. So, do you? 0345 6060 973. What do you make of the latest revelations? Just you and me having a chat. And are they going to land? Are they going to land? And does Dominic Cummings' track record somehow denude him of the power that what he's revealing should have? There's enough to get stuck into to kick things off. If you hit the numbers now, you will get through. And if we are concerned with the Cummings as opposed to the story, then you'll be particularly interested, I think, to hear how he responded to questions about why that ludicrous Downing Street Rose Garden press conference unfolded in the way that it did. That's when he claimed that he'd undertaken I think it was a 60-mile round trip, wasn't it, to Barnard Castle and back on his wife's birthday, in order to test his eyesight. And this is what he said: what I should have done is either just resigned and said nothing about anything, or I should have spoken to my family and said, listen, we're just going to have to come clean about the whole thing. So as far as I can tell, Dominic Cummings admitting that the whole Downing Street Rose Garden thing was a complete confection as well, one which Boris Johnson presumably was fully aware of before he instructed all of his most senior ministers to go out and defend Dominic Cummings, including, of course, Matt Hancock. God, we could do this all day. It's incredible, isn't it? 21 minutes after 10 is the time. There's no dispute that he's telling the truth, by the way. Dominic Cummings has produced the messages that were sent to him by the Prime Minister, and Downing Street hasn't even tried to deny. The only thing that they've denied is the bit about him needing to be persuaded that he shouldn't go and see the Queen when he might have been contagious himself. So, I mean, crackers, right? Absolutely incredible. But has Cummings got the credibility somehow to land the punches that he's trying to land? I'm really not sure, and I think it's as much to do with Cummings as it is to do with the cult of Johnson, if you like. So I'll give you an example. This is the cult of Johnson. You heard me say earlier, Dominic Cummings has done more than anybody else in this country to completely debase objective truth. He injected so many lies into the bloodstream of the nation that to see him now begging us to respond to his truth is almost comical. Now, the text here heard exactly the same programme that you heard. Last year, James, Cummings was a liar, and this year, because it suits your Tory-bashing views, he's Saint Dom. So someone hears me say, nobody in this country has done more to inject lies into the bloodstream of the nation than Dominic Cummings, and somebody is hearing me launch a hagiography. That's cultish, with an L. That is absolutely cultish, because you are literally denying the evidence of your own eyes and, in this case, ears. Bloke on Radio describes Dominic Cummings in the most damning of terms. Cult member honestly believes he's heard Bloke on Radio describing Dominic Cummings as a saint. That's what I mean by the people I can't help. I can't reach you. Literally, I'm on the radio saying 2 + 2 is 4, and you're texting me to say, how dare you say 2 + 2 is 5 on national radio? There's nothing I can do. But do keep listening, because eventually, by a process of intellectual osmosis, something might seep through your semi-permeable membrane. Peter is in Oxford. Peter, what's going on?
Hello, James. How are you doing?
Very well indeed.
Well, I think you and I are both fans of Orwell, aren't we? And we know what Newspeak is.
Yes.
And Cummings is an absolute master of the art. And Johnson is a pupil, not a very bright pupil, I have to say, and not doing it very well or very plausibly. So when you listen to them both, you have to believe Cummings. I think what's very significant is the fact that so many things haven't been denied. As you said earlier, the bodies piled high and so on.
Yes.
And when I say Newspeak, I mean, freedom means captivity, liberation means imprisonment, words are turned on their heads.
Yes.
So, they talk about Freedom Day yesterday. And as you rightly said in the programme, and many of your callers have said, it's not freedom for the many people who are vulnerable. And
it's the opposite.
Until yesterday.
Yes, the opposite, isn't it? Of people who are...
now, I mean, I would be reluctant to go into a shop at the moment when so many unmasked people are around. And that's not what I call freedom. You look at the nightclubs in areas of high incidence of coronavirus, you think, what's going to happen 2 weeks from now? So not to the people who are there necessarily, but to their second-degree contacts.
Of course. I mean, it's just, I mean, we are literally standing in the rain and pointing out how wet it is and listening to people claim that it's not raining at all. I mean, it's felt like that for a long time, but it seems to ramp up almost daily now. So the question, which we'll move on to a little later, which you've just alluded to, is how can any government tell you that you're not allowed to go to nightclubs next September unless you can prove you've had 2 vaccines, but you're free to go tonight?
Well, how come they can be so doctrinaire about the test and trace, which actually is known to work only when prevalence is low?
Yes.
And becomes less effective the more common the virus gets, because actually it'll save far fewer lives than stopping 100,000 people getting together at Silverstone. Just do the sums.
Yeah, of course, because it goes ping, 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 ping.
My reckoning is that, given that half the people with coronavirus are asymptomatic, the number of people infected at Silverstone on Sunday would have been of the order of 500. And each of those would have had contact with how many other people, whether vaccinated or not. Just do the sums. You're talking about potentially thousands of cases as a direct consequence of that crowd.
And it's known.
This government's capable of.
No, it's a known. Just briefly, Peter, the question of Cummings, it is quite odd, isn't it? How he's sort of, I mean, he's a bit of a wonky shopping trolley actually as well. I wonder how much projection is going on there, because he spent most of his, certainly right up until the referendum, he was a manipulator of truth. He was a disseminator of lies. He was an underminer of evidence-based analysis and a stoker of vile feelings, the kind of feelings that the right-wing media is back to stoking up again with regard to poor sods in dinghies. But, you know, they've got nothing else to talk about, because if they weren't talking about poor souls in dinghies, they'd have to talk about the bloke they've put in Downing Street and the Brexit that they've signed the entire country up for. So probably if I was one of them, I'd be talking about poor souls in dinghies. But Cummings has got all of that on his conscience, all of that on his shoulders. And now he's turning around and saying, the bloke I put in Downing Street is an absolute wrong-un. I worry that is just going to wash over the heads of everybody. The people that fell for his referendum lies and the people that didn't are both going to be primed to think, oh, jog on, Dominic, you've had your fun, just leave us alone now.
Yeah, I'm very glad you raised those points, because, I mean, Brexit, obviously, we had the Tory faithful applauding the end of freedom of movement. And freedom, you know, I've had your freedom, you've had your freedom.
Freedom Day.
You know, and the end of freedom of movement meant that British people, uniquely in the whole of Europe, British people are confined to travelling within two countries, UK and Ireland. You know,
travelling for work, travelling for work without visas. They can still go on holiday.
Travelling and staying longer than 3 months without let or hindrance.
That's right.
So that's abolition of a freedom in the name of freedom. Now, how can that
I
make
know
sense?
you're back to Orwell, but just briefly on the Cummings question, do you think he has, for want of a better phrase, has he shot his bolt? No matter what he comes out with now, it's not going to touch the sides.
There's more to come, isn't there?
I think there probably is. So you can plead
to him this evening.
Yes, there is a programme on the BBC this evening that I suspect I might even watch, even though come 1 o'clock these days, I think when I've done my 3 hours, I feel, right, I'm going to go and watch some cricket now. But I think this evening I might make an exception. 10:28 is the time. Peter, thank you very much indeed. As Peter waves farewell from Oxford, he frees up a phone line that you can, of course, grab. Question, no real sort of humdinger question this morning, but I do find myself leaning as the morning moves on to the question of whether or not Cummings has any credibility. So he's telling the truth now. He can prove it. It's written down. Downing Street aren't even denying it. But we live in an age, a bizarre age. Peter, quite right to cite George Orwell, who understood this sort of thing better than anybody. Does he actually have credibility? Even though he's telling the truth now, so many people still need to pretend that they weren't lied to by him then, that they're going to gloss over him telling the truth now. And so many people who knew that he was lying then are very conscious of how contorted it can seem to now claim that everybody should treat him as some sort of paragon of veracity. So does Dominic Cummings have the credibility to do what he's trying to do to Boris Johnson? And hopefully that's a question everyone can have a crack at, wherever you sit politically. Does Dominic Cummings have the credibility to land the punches on Boris Johnson that he's swinging at the moment, even though he's got the receipts, he's got the evidence? There's no debate about whether he's telling the truth or not. The only bits that Downing Street are denying are the bits that aren't written down. But I genuinely worry, as someone who holds Cummings in the very lowest of regard, for the most obvious of reasons, that I probably look at him with just as much disdain as people who believed all his Brexit lies and have now somehow twisted their head back round again and are looking down on the bloke who sold them the last big con. It is one of those mornings where it's hard to know which thread to tug, isn't it? The idea that you can be in ICU with serious life-threatening coronavirus and just a few months later display an absolute absence of empathy for the thousands of people that could die from it as a result of the policies that you want to introduce, in defiance of what your scientific advisors are doing, but in support of what headbangers on the Daily Mail's comment pages are calling for. And that is Boris Johnson. How do we know? Because Dominic Cummings is telling us, his closest and most trusted advisor until the middle of November last year. And that's just surreal. But I really wonder whether we're all actually going to agree with each other that Dominic Cummings has no credibility. My lot, because he's been lying through his teeth since 2016. Your lot, because you're still not ready to surrender the cultish feelings that you have towards Boris Johnson. And speaking of cults, I'm going to read this out. I read out some compliments on the programme, but there are some that are more important than others. And I'm never sure how to deal with the texts from cults. I'm really not. You know, the ones that hear me describe Dominic Cummings as an absolute scumbag and then text in to say, oh, so you think he's a saint now, do you? I just don't know how to deal with that. It's presumably you need training. You have to stage interventions. It's like being a family member of somebody who's joined a Jim Jones-style organisation. I genuinely don't know how to deal with it. So I read one out today just to point out what it looks like. And I got this from Pete in Stamford, which really just got under my armour. James, ignore the Burke who claims you're a Tory basher. Some of us can be helped, and through listening to your show since the first lockdown, I have been. I'd probably be quite ashamed of the texts I sent to you this time last year, but if I'm ever in your neck of the woods, I'd definitely buy you a pint. Thank you. From Pete in Stamford, brackets, no, Cummings does not have any credibility. Kath in Brighton. Kath, what do you think?
Well, I'm really no fan of Cummings, either for the Brexit or for kind of the Rose Garden thing.
Which he's also now reneged on, if you like. I don't know if you heard that bit. What I should have done is either just resigned and said nothing about anything or spoken to my family and said, listen, we're just going to have to come clean about the whole thing. So if people who were ringing me up to defend him back then are now being told that they were defending lies, and yet they somehow will blame, I don't know. Anyway, carry on.
I mean, I actually do believe this, and I'm seriously no fan of him because the day before the Rose Garden announcement we unfortunately had to, well, my dad was cremated for having passed from COVID, and none of us could be there.
Yeah, God,
but
stark.
It's a case of a stop clock can be right twice a day, and this is so unedifying for him. This is not in his interest. This is an admission against interest. He could have so easily disappeared quietly off to Tufton Street or its equivalent. This does him no favours as his career.
Well, except for vengeance, which is a fairly intoxicating brew, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a very bitter dish to wait that long.
Well,
if you're thinking about it, this guy likes power. This is sealing him off from power.
But if he was worried... Oh, you're making me defend Dominic Cummings now. If he was worried... Or am I? Actually, I can't work out which one of us is defending Dominic Cummings. If he was worried...
I understand
that. I understand that. But if he was that worried about what Johnson was doing, then he would have intervened at the time. The fact that he's serving the dish cold speaks to me of vengeance and bitterness in a way that rather undermines your defence of him, which is another reason to trust him, is because he's not doing himself any favours.
And what he's doing is he's saying this when they've opened up. He's not dropped all of these in the run-up to that so-called Freedom Day, which is interesting.
Yes. But, he probably was thinking that Johnson was going to give the full Churchill yesterday, and therefore today was quite carefully timed to rain on that particular parade. But the question, Kath, is not whether or not we like him. I'm not sure. You'd struggle to find anyone. But do you think... No, hang on, let me tell you what the question is before you tell me what the answer is. It's not whether or not we like him. It's not whether or not he's telling the truth, because he is. He's got the receipts. The question is whether he's got the credibility to make it matter.
I think it's a process of attrition, James.
Yeah. No, so it's not...
I think you watch what's happening with sectors of the press that were supportive to him before.
Yes.
And it's cutting away and cutting away and cutting away.
But until Rupert Murdoch decides that Johnson's toast, I mean, a few people saying it all depends on what the right-wing media do, and I'm afraid they're probably right.
I'm quite interested in watching what's happened with the Mail and the Telegraph as well. But the Sun is being quite interesting with some of the stuff it's put out on its YouTube channel and things. They are slightly less supportive.
Yes, but they'll be pointing at the polling. So the backbenchers will have him for breakfast if the polling slides, because I think everybody now knows that if the opportunity presents itself and there is a self-interest defence, Boris Johnson will throw absolutely anybody under the bus. I mean, absolutely anybody. We've seen that throughout his life, personally, professionally and politically. But the winnability. So many have already sacrificed their souls at the altar of Boris Johnson's perceived winnability that when it dissipates or dilutes, they're going to be sharpening their knives like there's no tomorrow. 10:40 is the time. This question of whether or not he has the credibility to wreak the havoc that he seeks to wreak. He's got the evidence. That's not the question. It's a personality issue, this, and I worry, for some of the reasons that Kath touched upon, I worry that he hasn't got the credibility. But both Kath and Peter, of course, suggesting that this is a gradual erosion and attrition, that it's all not going to be settled today. What's coming next, and after that, and after that, and who else is going to turn, and what else is going to emerge. Sue is in Frinton-on-Sea. Sue, what would you like to say?
Hello, James.
Hello,
I'm a
Sue.
first-time caller.
Welcome.
Nice to talk to you. I think my immediate reaction to your question about Cummings is that, of course, he's got credibility. It's not that he's not lying sometimes, because we know that he lied about the Rose Garden. We knew at the time. We're very good at spotting lying, but what we have to do is we have to listen to what he's saying and ask ourselves why he's saying it at the time. And I think the interesting thing about Cummings is that our perception of him is very much influenced by the dramatisation of his involvement in the Brexit
Well, not me. I never
situation.
saw it, actually.
No, but I think it affects our view that
Yes.
he's some sort of Bengali. Now he's an employee, and he's right in there, and he's been in all those meetings, and he's got the evidence. So I don't have any problem believing that what he says is true, particularly when he provides the evidence. And I think
But that's different from credibility. That's different from credibility.
Yeah.
And I do need to keep reminding you of the Fifth Avenue principle. Donald Trump knew somehow that he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and not lose a single vote. Dominic Cummings, in a sense, is producing Polaroid photographs of Boris Johnson shooting people on Fifth Avenue.
Yeah.
And the principle tells us that he won't lose a single vote as a result.
But it's incredibly convenient to look at Dominic Cummings in this situation and say, well, actually, he's just being vengeful.
Yes.
He's just looking to further his career, and sometimes we can use that to actually remove the credibility of his argument. When I don't think that removes the credibility of his argument at all, when he's got the evidence. I'm happy to look at.
Yeah, sorry, carry on. No, I've talked over each other.
It's truth and how things have been happening over the last few years.
Yeah,
it all fits.
No, it does all fit. I think we're not at cross purposes. I think you're probably just a little bit more optimistic than I am at the moment. And apologies for the confusion on the phone line there. It was a little bit patchy as well, but I was riveted by what you were saying. I don't know. I guess I have been reduced to believing, and this is entirely down to Brexit. No attempts today to avoid the B word for a record-breaking amount of time. And you know what I'm going to point out to you? I'm going to do the old Andrea Leadsom, Pascal Lamy bit, where, I sat there in the Newsnight studio at the BBC, and it was like an episode of The Simpsons where the angels started singing in the sky above me. I just thought, how the hell is this happening? This is the BBC, and I have to treat Andrea Leadsom as an equal and opposite source of knowledge regarding the World Trade Organization when the bloke that's telling us she's wrong is a former Director General of the World Trade Organization. Cummings created that, or at least did more to create that ridiculous environment than anybody else. So the evidence doesn't matter. Cummings created a world. Oh, here it comes. The thesis is finally beginning to crystallize. Cummings created a Britain in which evidence doesn't matter, in which evidence is less persuasive than not you, Sue, but your ill-informed opinion. This was predicted by Isaac Asimov, the science fiction writer, just to continue the literary allusions of the morning. Your ill-informed opinion is worth more or the same as the evidence. And Cummings created that, consciously, I would argue. Edward Berners, is it, who wrote the book Propaganda? It's all in there. He created that, and now he's coming up with the evidence. He's throwing evidence onto a table that he designed to denigrate and ignore evidence. Man, I wish I was studying this 50 years later rather than having to live through it every single blinking day. That's it, isn't it? It's taken us 45 minutes and a few cracking callers to get there. That's what I'm worried about. Dominic Cummings built a table that denies evidence. And now he's throwing evidence onto the table that Boris Johnson shouldn't be trusted with a lawnmower, never mind an entire country. Shouldn't be trusted with scissors. Shouldn't be trusted with nail clippers. That's it. Cummings built the table that denies evidence, and now he's smashing evidence down onto the table and asking the country to believe it. How are we going to fix that? Anthony is in Kuenssberg. Anthony, what would you like to say?
The one thing I was going to add to the discussion is it kind of makes me wonder about how much of recent decision making, and I'm referring to yesterday's sort of roll back on, or actually to go clubbing, you do now from September need to be double vaccinated, is almost like a subconscious response to, Cummings is coming out with this information tomorrow. We need to look tough on the virus, even making decisions that would be really tough for us to make.
Kremlinology going on here, isn't there, with you? You could be right.
And then quietly during the summer they'll roll back that legislation, or
they won't
completely, and nothing changes.
Oh, well, I'm not going to say that they won't. Not categorically. I was fairly certain yesterday they'd have to introduce it because of the cognitive dissonance we spent an hour discussing. I don't know if you were listening. The idea that if I was 21, I'd have gone to a club, but I shouldn't have been allowed to. And, of course, bringing in the passport to double vaccinate, you can't get in without proving that you've had both vaccines. That means that, you know, they are exercising some control over it, albeit belatedly. And you can still go tonight without having any vaccines at all. But in September, you won't be allowed to. That is just stone cold bonkers. But you think possibly a little bit of distraction tactics because they knew that this programme was coming out today.
Yeah, and they know it's going to be really unpopular with their backbenchers. They know it's going to be really unpopular with people, and they'll get criticism because of the thing you've mentioned, that people were allowed to go out the like just 12 hours earlier. But I think it's partly so they can then say, "Oh, look at us, we're making unpopular decisions, even though we'll get criticism from our own party." I do think it's like they just want to do it so. They can look a bit more.
I don't think I agree. I don't think I agree with you, but I can't prove that you're wrong. I mean, and you're inserting theories into the space created by the complete absence of clarity and leadership, as has been already evinced again this morning. So on Sunday morning, it was Robert Jenrick heading home from the studios in his ministerial limousine. I shouldn't say that. They all deserve to have a chauffeur-driven car. In my humble, just like I do. So he's on his way home from the studios, patting himself. I did a pretty good job there. Bang up job. Boris will be delighted. Absolutely. Cover drive, straight back. Nothing got past me. I didn't nick anything to the slips. Absolutely defended Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak's decision to sign up for this pilot scheme that allows them to avoid self-isolation. Well done, honest Bob. I'm the best. Yay, go me. And then the radio comes out and says, Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak have completely reversed their decision to avoid self-isolation by signing up for a mysterious pilot scheme. And honest Bob sitting in the back of the car going, oh my days, that's just, what? Today, Paul Scully doing the rounds saying, well, the thing about the app is you can take it or leave it, you know, if it pings, it pings, if it doesn't ping, it doesn't ping, and if it pings, you can behave like it hasn't pinged, and just have a chat with your boss, and if your boss wants you to come to work, even though it's pinged, then you could have the thing and don't worry about the ping. And he's on his way home in the back of the old car. Giving himself a little pat. Well done, Scullers. Nice work. Probably a little promotion for you here. It's about time these people realise what a player you are. Downing Street spokesman pops up on the radio and says, no. If you ping, you ping. And you stay indoors, you self-isolate. God knows what that Scully bloke was talking about on the radio earlier this morning, but don't listen to him, listen to me. Which is all very well and good and even mildly amusing, despite my lack of comedy bones. However, this is our lives and our livelihoods, both, crucially, in play here. They are literally saying heads at 9 o'clock in the morning and tails at 11 o'clock. And then however it lands, you're supposed to give them a handshake and let them keep the coin. It's nuts. Absolutely nuts. 0345 606 0973. Mirage is in Hemel Hempstead. Mirage, what would you like to say?
Hello, James.
Hello.
I'd like to say that level history, we were taught how to analyse sources by their reliability and their accuracy.
Yes.
And Dominic Cummings definitely has the accuracy, but what needs to be liability. I'd argue
there's something wrong with your phone line. I keep losing the third word. You're not a spy, are you? You haven't been hacked by that new outfit that's going after journalists all over the world or something like that? It's like a crossword. I'm trying to work out...
Say.
Well, you wouldn't... Yeah, very good answer. It's like a crossword. I'm trying to work out what the missing word is. Let's carry on.
Okay. I think he has the reliability.
Yes.
He is a complete slimeball.
Yes.
And I think he would do whatever he needs to do to keep his platform.
Do you? You don't think there's any moral compunction here? You don't think there's guilt? If alongside the desire for vengeance, there's guilt here?
I doubt it.
Yeah, all right.
I think he'd do anything he has to do, but he's trying to have his cake and eat it. He created a world where truth doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And he's now trying to give truth to that world.
And I guess
it's not going to work.
Only people who can see the reality of Brexit can sign up to that analysis at the moment, because, of course, the people who aren't ready to sign up to the reality of Brexit are still pretending that he didn't create a world in which truth doesn't matter, aren't they?
Yeah, the cult of Johnson.
That's where the cult comes from. Yeah, you're absolutely... Yeah. Is there room for denial of what we've just said? I mean, literally, because it's so bizarre, isn't it? If you believed him over Brexit, but you don't believe him now, is the message coming from one side. And I guess you don't believe him over Brexit, but you do believe him now, is the message coming from the other side. And that idea of having created an environment in which evidence doesn't matter means that never the twain shall meet. Because normally you'd say, all right, this lot believes that, and that lot believes this. Bang, here's all the evidence. Now you can all agree. But we can't, can we? Because of what he did to our country. Him personally, and deliberately, and consciously.
Yeah. I don't like him, but I can enjoy what he's doing, and I can enjoy the show.
My enemy's enemy is my friend. A bit of that, is it?
Oh, no, I don't like him, but I like what he's doing.
Yeah, well, I think that's what the figure of speech means. You know, you're not going to invite him around your house for tea, but you can kind of feel quite warm towards him while he's having a swing at an even bigger enemy, even though he used to have the other enemy in his pocket. 0345 606 0973. Stay with this. And again, Groundhog Day, isn't it? I will offer you up another example of the government's incompetence and ask you whether there is any analysis of it that doesn't lead to the inevitable conclusion that it's epic incompetence. How come I can go clubbing tonight without having had any jabs at all, but in September I won't be able to? Just a little bit more on that developing theory about Dominic Cummings' problem being the fact that he created a table on which evidence doesn't matter. He created a country in which evidence doesn't matter. An ill-informed opinion or a strong feeling carries more weight than expert analysis or evidence-based explanation. I think that is his problem, but whether or not he can overcome it is a conversation that we're going to continue having alongside the one about nightclubs. But the latest example of it is here. I'll read you something. I don't know whether you're following the attempts by some of the more despicable corners of the so-called media to malign a journalist called Jess Brammer, who is in line to be appointed to the head of the BBC News channel. I don't know if you're aware of that story any more than you're aware of the fact that the current Director General of the BBC literally stood for political office as a Conservative and was Deputy Chairman of his local Tory group, or that one of the presenters of Radio 4's Today programme was the President of the Oxford University Conservative Association, or, of course, that Andrew Neil, who presented programmes on the BBC for years, simultaneously published a magazine that platformed Nazi apologists, Islamophobes, Brexit cheerleaders and climate change deniers. So they were all capable of being completely impartial. For the record, in the case of the Today programme presenter, I think he is actually impartial. He manages to do it. The other two, not so much. Andrew Neil, not in a million bloody years. But hey-ho, this is where we are. They're going after Jess Brammer. And this is the Telegraph today. The front runner to become head of the BBC's news channel posted a series of now deleted left-wing tweets in which she railed against Boris Johnson, Brexit and Britain's imperial past. So you find yourself thinking, deleted tweets, I better have a look at those before I decide whether or not, the Telegraph has got half of a case here, or the beginnings of a case. They obviously won't mention the fact that Andrew Neil published that magazine and got paid by the same people that published the Telegraph to do so, because that would be slightly hard to avoid any conclusion about the utter hypocrisy of the people who have the bare audacity to put their name to bilge like this. But you can't say that, James, until you've actually checked the tweets. So I'm going to read you the tweets. These are the smoking guns. This is evidence of absolute inability to be impartial. I'd also remind you that these tweets were issued when she didn't work for the BBC. Andrew Neil published Islamophobes, climate change deniers, Nazi apologists, Brexit cheerleaders, all while he did work for the BBC. So make of that what you will. Here are the offending tweets. Are you ready? This piece on black Brits genuinely considering leaving the UK because of the level of racism, particularly if Boris Johnson wins, is really shocking. It won't be a surprise to people who live this reality every day, and in admitting my shock, I show my ignorance as a white woman. Stone her! Do I read that again, or are you absolutely crystal clear that it contains absolutely no evidence whatsoever of impartiality? It is a comment upon an article that contained lived experience and testimony from people describing their own reality, and it made her realise that she didn't actually, as a white woman, have much understanding of their own reality. Proper journalists, when they are made aware of perspectives that they had previously been ignorant of, evidence-based perspectives, try to find out more about them. Racists and idiots stick their fingers in their ears, close their eyes and start screaming woke. That's the end of my TED Talk. Here's another tweet. Here's another smoking gun. Whether you watched Boris Johnson's interview yesterday or not, here are 5 things the Prime Minister said that aren't true. Gordon Rayner, the associate editor of the Daily Telegraph, elects not in this article to list what those 5 things are, because he doesn't think that you have the intelligence, the wit or the critical thinking skills to decide whether or not the 5 things described as not being true are true or not. He thinks that you're so stupid you'll just start screaming foul without being shown the evidence that is supposed to prove that there is something wrong with that tweet. I would need to know what the 5 things were, and then we could establish whether they were true or not. The overarching question of whether or not Boris Johnson has a strained relationship with the truth historically is probably rhetorical. But hey-ho, associate editor of the Daily Telegraph, Gordon Rayner, is going to tell you that there are 5 things the Prime Minister said that aren't true, and saying that is outrageous, but he won't tell you what the 5 things are. And finally, April the 23rd, 2019, Brexit : it's like Better Call Saul, but less funny or interesting or enjoyable. What? Less funny or interesting or enjoyable than the spin-off series from Breaking Bad. Brexit. What exactly is anybody getting their pants in a bunch over regarding that tweet? Those are the 3, the most smokingest of guns that these goons could find, contain absolutely no evidence at all of what this poor woman is being accused of. But hey-ho, on we go. 9 minutes after 11 is the time. Back to the question of Dominic Cummings' credibility and how we think this is going to shake down. Not just how we feel about it, because, you know, that's interesting but not exactly important, but how it's going to shake down. What happens when a man creates an environment in which evidence doesn't matter, in which ill-informed opinions trump evidence-based explanations, and then he turns up 5 years later and says, look at all my evidence, believe me. What happens? It's just so weird. Rachel's in Cirencester. Rachel, what would you like to say?
Hello, good morning.
Hello.
Sorry, I'm really tired and very nervous, and I hope I don't start gibbering nonsense.
How can you be tired? I've only been on for an hour.
No, it's just the heat. I hardly slept a wink last night.
I'm sorry. It's
I've
awful.
had my cat leaping through the window on my face as well.
Good Lord. I say, that's a very graphic description. What prompted you to pick up the phone, if you can remember?
Well, I just think that, Dominic Cummings,
yes.
Can I carry it? So I'd like to carry on your analogy that you started before the break about 20 minutes ago.
Go on.
Well, we all know that he's the main architect of Brexit. You know, he built it. He laid the first brick of the Brexit house. He conned the Leave voters to ring the doorbell. He invited them in.
Yes.
But now he's attempting to burn the house down. But his touch paper seems to have gone soggy and his lighter's run out of gas.
I like this.
You know, and even if people's alarm bells are ringing, which, you know, mine are, and I'm sure a lot of people's alarm bells are ringing, I think the fire alarm has run out of batteries, and I feel like I've run out of batteries as well, you know, just because it's just so constant. You know,
that's where it feels a bit Trumpish, doesn't it? There came a point during Donald Trump's presidency where you just realised it doesn't matter what happens now. There is so much manure under the bridge already that another bucket load of manure people aren't even going to be able to smell it.
No, well, the methane will set it off even more, isn't it?
I think we can leave that analogy now, Rachel. I think it's run its course.
Definitely. I told you I was tired.
You did. So you're pessimistic then, possibly because you're so tired, but you don't feel that this table onto which he's thrown all the evidence is going to matter because he's undermined all the evidence.
He has, and he's hung by his own. Well, he's blown it by his own petard. I can't remember the proper expression now.
No, he is hung by his own petard.
Hoisted.
So he's created this world, and now he's a victim of it. And I wish we could enjoy that. I wish we could actually have a little bit of Schadenfreude, but we can't, of course, because there he is.
But I wonder, does he feel, has he now, well, maybe he has always had some kind of moral compass. I don't know. We can't ask him. Just like...
No, what's the word? I don't know. I'm going to try and get an interview with him. I sense it wouldn't be as much of a no-no.
That would be amazing.
Well, but I'm just genuinely interested, like you are, in asking him. And he's certainly answered difficult questions with Laura Kuenssberg, but I'm not going to hold my breath. I think that with Brexit, he was an ideologue. So although I think he was horribly wrong about everything, the end justifies the means. If you are ideologically committed to getting out of the European Union, then it doesn't matter what you do to achieve it. And there is not logic isn't quite the right word, but there is a rationale there that even those of us who think it was a really silly thing to do can begin to get our head around. And he weaponised racists, and he did all of the disgusting things that we will, for the rest of our lives, find despicable. But he sees it as being justified by the end result. So that doesn't prove that he never had a conscience, does it? That doesn't prove that he was amoral from the start. It just proves that he saw that goal as being more important than anything else in the game, I think.
Yeah, quite. I mean, somebody really needs to ask him, say, why? Why have you done this? Why? I mean, obviously, he might say, well, because I don't think he would say because I'm ambition twisted about having to leave government. I don't think he'd ever admit to that.
I'd like to hear him say guilt. I'd like to hear him say, because I want to be able to sleep again at night, and I can't believe what I inflicted on the country in the context of Boris Johnson, and then subsequent to that, what Boris Johnson inflicted on the country. I mean, he's here today in the newspapers, and Conservative support skews wildly towards the upper end of the age range. As indeed does Brexit support. And here he is now, as proven by his right-hand man, his former right-hand man, saying, if you're over 80, I don't care if you die, if that means we can keep Wetherspoons open. And that is obviously a gross simplification, but it's a simplification of the truth. It's more than keeping Wetherspoons open. If you're over 80, yours is a life I consider disposable. And of course, lots and lots of people under 80 died. That's what averages mean. Yeah, but long COVID, ICUs, healthcare workers. Spoke to one yesterday, didn't we, Joe? Absolutely broken. And apologising for being broken. Acknowledging, as all good people have done since this coronavirus began, that there are other people in a much worse position than me. So you've got all of these children running around complaining about having to wear masks. And decent people are saying, well, I've had a nervous breakdown, or Joe didn't say that, he just absolutely burnt out. I've had a nervous breakdown, or I've buried one family member, or I have lost a lot of money, or but I know there's a lot of other people who are worse off than me. That's 48% of the country. 52% of them are still screaming like toddlers about having to wear masks. Actually, I don't think that ratio's fair. There's about 10% of the country screaming like toddlers about having to wear masks. Culminating yesterday in them having an anti-lockdown protest 12 hours after the lockdown ended. Anyway. Rachel, thank you. I hope you get a better night's kip tonight. And I hope your cat stays off your face. James, stop being so blinking pessimistic. Yes, he's got no credibility, and yes, we have moved to a post-fact era. That's the most beautiful follow-up to telling me to be less pessimistic. I genuinely mean that. Don't be so pessimistic. We live in a post-fact era, in part because of him, but those of us still living in the fact-based universe can now get a little more smug about it all. Let's just enjoy this bit of news for once. We were right, they were wrong. Brackets, get over it, says Sam. Well, I don't know, Sam. I mean, Schadenfreude, when you know that it's not going to land, or you fear that it's not going to land. It is. I thought I would enjoy the circular firing squad more, a lot more, I'll be honest with you, because I thought that it would happen pre-COVID, before coronavirus came along and changed everything. So I thought the circular firing squad with Cummings in Downing Street and Brexit falling apart around their ears would just be hugely enjoyable. You see it a little bit with Lord Frost, trying to blame the negotiations he undertook upon the people he was negotiating with 6 months after, doing a lap of honour for being a genius. And it is objectively hilarious. Brandon Lewis standing up in the House of Commons saying there is no border in the Irish Sea. 6 months later saying this bloody border in the Irish Sea is a right old problem, lads. What are we going to do about it? It is objectively hilarious. But of course, Cummings created the world in which none of that matters. Because you still believe, oh no, that's fine. Oh, that's their fault. That's not real. How dare you? Stop telling me the truth, you evil lefty. So that is what robs you of some of the humour. This one, I don't know. No Schadenfreude for me. Cummings is crackers, absolutely crackers. Johnson's disgusting. Watching them duke it out in normal circumstances would be hilarious and hugely enjoyable. But not when, on one side, you've got someone sitting on his hands as people died at a rate of knots, and on the other side, you've got the bloke saying, well, if you're over 80, sorry, folks, that's curtains for you. Cogito ergo sum. I've got to come up with another Latin phrase. I got an O-level in Latin. I used to be able to quote quite a lot of Virgil, but I can't just keep saying cogito ergo sum. Primus inter pares. Primus inter pares, folks. Something ad astra. 20 minutes after 11 is the time. A couple of calls to come. A couple of phone lines free, actually. So if we can keep them free, I'd like you to have a go at explaining to me, and you can... I generally discourage attempts at deliberate comedy. Obviously, some of our finest moments together on the radio have involved people ringing in and being unintentionally hilarious. But the question leaves the door open for some attempts at being funny, because I want someone to have a go just at explaining to that 19-year-old there why they're allowed to go clubbing tonight, even though they haven't had any vaccines, right? But in September they won't be. Do you want to have a go at that? I'm sick of saying maybe there's something going on here that I've missed. Because there never is there? It's beginning to sound like false modesty. It's not. It's genuine humility. You look at something that is so obviously pant-wettingly stupid, and then you see that it's coming from the very seat of government, and you think, well, it can't be that obviously pant-wettingly stupid because these dudes are in charge. And then you remember that on Sunday, Robert Jenrick toured the studios, defending a policy that Boris Johnson abandoned 90 minutes later. And today, Paul Scully's been touring the studios, offering up an explanation that Boris Johnson has abandoned 20 minutes later. So it is pant-wettingly stupid, and they haven't got the first idea what they're doing. But maybe, on this occasion, you can make some sense of it. So there's a 19-year-old over there, a mythical 19-year-old. Should we call him Josh? Young people seem to be called Josh a lot these days. No? Josh? Or Tiger? What do you want to call him? Or her? Kit? Kit's a nice name. So Sam? No. We'll go for Josh. So Josh is going clubbing tonight. He's going to get absolutely mashed. Up on the podium, giving it the whole 9 yards, all right? He's never had a vaccine, he's never going to have one. In September, he won't be allowed to go clubbing unless he's been vaccinated, unless he's been injected twice. Would you explain to Josh, actually we should call him Roger the Raver, would you explain to Roger the Raver why he's allowed to go out tonight and lick the faces of everybody else on the dance floor, even if he's never had a vaccination in his life, but come September, he won't be allowed to get into the club at all unless he can prove that he's been double jabbed? Go on, have a crack at that. If you can make sense of that, then as the great Les Dennis famously observed, do people actually sing along now at home when I do that? When I say, as the great Les Dennis famously observed, do people actually go to the radio, driving along in the car, I'll give you the money myself? Well, I will. Peter's in Dudley. Peter, what's going on?
Hello, James. Only my dad calls me Peter, but thank you anyway. That's really nice of you. You are like the air conditioning to a hot and sweaty world. Thank you.
I'll take that, actually. I think I'll take that. I might change my Twitter profile. Carry on.
So I'm just wondering if we can actually, like Dominic Cummings, of course he's an opportunist, but I just wonder if we can't blame him completely because he is just taking advantage of where we are and where we've perhaps been slipping to since probably before the First World War, I'd say, in terms of the way that those in power, I guess, tell the public what they need to hear rather than what the truth is. So, and he's just taken full advantage of that. I guess for me, what this is about morality and truth. The two things go hand in hand. And if there is no kind of base of collective morality, then truth has got no foundation to sit on. So therefore, whenever we just fire a whole bunch of truths out and they just fall away, and then the next week we have another truth. And this whole saying just annoys me on social media of like, live your own truth. But it doesn't work if there's
well, that's a view. That's a view. I respect your opinion. And someone's just told you they think the moon's made of camembert. Yes, I respect your opinion. Now let's take another one.
And that's the thing. I wonder, because when I was 20 years ago, when I was in Cummings to do my A levels and studying propaganda in the Second World War, it was just very cleverly done in order to keep the public on side and let them know what they needed to hear, and it caused a wave of patriotism, a wave of support behind what we were doing as a country. And I'm guessing we are so fragmented now, we don't have that. We don't have maybe even the simplest.
There's a great line.
Moral rules.
Well, there was a great line yesterday that someone drew to my attention from Orwell in 1941. So in the middle of what you describe, and he talked about how in the face of a common enemy, that the country does come together. You know, it's a family. It's a disparate, feuding family, but in the face of a common enemy, it does come together. And that was true. So this is where I dispute your thesis a bit, because I think what's happening now is unprecedented. Because this government is built upon division and built upon the denigration of objective reality and the dismissal of experts and evidence, they have to keep us separate. They have to keep us divided. Otherwise, the whole castle comes crumbling down. So we're not a family that unite against a common enemy, and that's why you've got absolute... I don't even know what word to use to describe people running around talking about face nappies and muzzles and anti-vaxxers, and that's why the government can't act against them, because they've created a world in which that stupid opinion is worth as much as, well, with the example I always use, the former Director General of the World Trade Organization.
Yeah, it seemed to happen and work for the first 5 minutes, didn't it? I guess I cast my mind back to 30 years ago when the first lockdown happened, and the streets were quiet. We were saying the air is clearer
because we'd seen the pictures. We'd seen the pictures from elsewhere in the world. We weren't really responding to what the government was telling us to do. We were responding to what we'd seen most obviously in Italy. You know? Absolutely.
I agree with you, James. I just wonder if, because of a lack of a moral framework in order to sit the truth on, that we're never going to...
and Cummings is on a hiding to nothing. It doesn't matter how hard he pedals, the wheels are never going to turn any quicker than they're turning now.
No, but I guess he's also taking full advantage of the fact that he can say whatever he wants and call it truth, because we've been doing that for years.
But he's got the evidence this time. He's got the receipts. And then we're back to the original problem of why would you believe him now? He's shouting wolf. And there is a wolf. But the last 50 times he shouted wolf, there wasn't a wolf. Oh, what a great call, Peter. Thank you. 26 minutes after 11 is the time. Laura is in Chislehurst. Laura, what would you like to say?
Hi. I know some young generations, 20-ish, who...
Is he called Roger the Raver?
Yes.
God, marvellous. I'll give him... Yeah, good old Rog. Give him my love, won't you? Now carry on.
Well, I had a quiet word with Roger, and Roger told me that he would not be taking the vaccine because... as far as he was concerned, he was young, so therefore not high risk, and everyone else around him who was vulnerable would probably be vaccinated. And so there you go. There was no real incentive. I think that if you have to have the double jab as a youngster to get into nightclubs, to get into the social scene,
yes,
they're going to be more eager to take it up.
So it becomes a carrot and a stick, almost.
Yes.
Okay.
And letting them have it for a few months before, because they haven't done this for such a long time. Bear in mind, some of them will have never done it.
No, I know.
So they go to their first rave, they go to their first nightclub. Fantastic. They don't want that to be taken away just because they haven't had 2 jabs.
I think you're right. I think you're obviously right. But obviously there is a shadow over what you've just said that is quite chilling, because, and it's contained within this question, why is the government so keen for them to get jabbed?
Because they're the future, I suppose. They're the economy.
Well, and also because it's the only way to protect the whole population from a rampaging virus. And of course, that then is the point at which I remind you that it's not kicking in for at least 6 weeks. So that's 6 weeks essentially of turning up the heat in the Petri dish.
But that's 6 weekends.
Yeah, 6 weekends.
And I mean.
Do they not do student nights anymore on Thursdays?
Some of them still work, but that gives them a real good taste of the cherry, doesn't it?
It does. No, I like it. I mean, that is it. So here is a little. What do they call it? Not a taste of the cherry. There's a phrase for it. You give them a little sniff of
taster.
Yeah. Well, I was looking for something a little bit more poetical than a taster. What is it called? A sniff of the barmaid's apron. There you go. You give them one sniff. You give them one sniff of the barmaid's apron, and then you tell them if you want to have a pint, you're going to have to get double vaccinated. You see?
Yeah. So now you see Roger's going to have that vaccination apparently
because he's got to rave on.
Yeah.
On that we can all agree. Well, you're right, but it's bleak because it means that we've now got 6 weeks of essentially letting it do its thing as part of a process that's designed to get people to help us stop it doing its thing. And again, it's got a touch of the Paul Scully's Robert Jenricks. Marching around, go, yeah, great, but now we'll do the opposite. Get a jab, but don't get a jab. Go clubbing, but don't go clubbing. Go clubbing tonight, July the 20th, even if you've never had a vaccine in your life. You could be the face-licking champion of East Anglia. You can go clubbing tonight, that's absolutely fine. September the 1st, absolutely not unless you're double jabbed. Go on. Go on. Hello, Mrs. What's the chops off Father Ted? Go on. Riddle me that, seriously. Just on the sort of more serious issue of vaccination and the rest of it, I'll just read you this from Tom, which it dropped into my Twitter line 2 days ago, actually, but I didn't notice it, and someone must have just either liked it or promoted it, because I just noticed it now. He writes, I'm young, 28, somewhat healthy, no underlying health conditions, at least. I didn't get the vaccine. The amount of stuff I've read and watched online, there we are, actually made me more scared of the vaccine than of the virus itself. On top of this, my granddad, who's 75, was incredibly lucky to get a mild dose of COVID, and he ended up being fine. So because of all the stuff I'd seen online, on top of my granddad only having a mild dose and being fine, I took it upon myself to believe that I'm invisible, and that I would be fine if I got COVID. It's not as bad as it's made out to be. I tested positive on Wednesday. It's now Sunday, and I've barely been able to get out of bed to use the toilet. There have been times I feared I'd have to go to the hospital. Fortunately, I haven't, but let me tell you, it's been the worst and most scary few days of my whole life. Thanks for that, Tom. It does take courage to admit you were wrong. There is no point having a mind if you never change it. Which brings us back to Dominic Cummings. Has he changed his mind? I mean, he seemed convinced throughout that Boris Johnson was reprehensible, and yet he stayed there. And now he's what is he trying to cast himself as? An avenging angel? I genuinely don't know. That's the bit I'd love to get to the bottom of. Why did you sit on your hands? With Whitty and Valance, clearly think Johnson's absolutely ridiculous, but they also know that if they weren't there, he'd probably be even more ridiculous. Remember, the independent advisor on the ministerial code resigned in disgust at Johnson's failure to act upon the report that had found Priti Patel was a vile bully. And he's replaced him with someone who was in the Bullingdon Club with him. This is the point at which a script editor would say to you, if you submitted this for a drama or a comedy, the script editor would say to you, I'm not so sure about this old boy. I don't think anyone's going to buy this. I mean, look, replace him with someone who's clearly a bit of a crony or an old pal, but not an actual fellow member of the Bullingdon Club coming in now to be his independent advisor on the ministerial code. That's just not going to wash. But this is Brexit Britain. Johnson's done it. You probably didn't even know. So, and that's the problem, really, isn't it? Is you just don't kind of know where it ends. It continues to unravel. But Cummings sat there. So Whitty and Valance are in their jobs because they're thinking if we're not there, God knows who will replace us with. Probably a mate from the Bullingdon Club who once did a shift with the St John's ambulance or something like that. Cummings, I don't get it. I mean, again, that defence of him, that he was so ideologically committed to getting out of the European Union that he really didn't care at all about what tools were used, what lies, what nonsenses, what dangerous provocations and divisions were deployed to achieve that goal. I've never felt like that about anything. But, it's like intellectual terrorism. If you believe, for example, so passionately in the cause of a united Ireland that you're prepared to blow up children in Manchester, then I will never understand you, I don't think. I get the idea of going to war, but the intellectual terrorism of believing so passionately in the need to get out of the European Union, even if you can't really do a bang-up job of explaining why, it's such a passionate belief that you will deploy any intellectual, emotional tool to achieve it. I get that. And then he got into Downing Street. He watched as Johnson, came close to infecting the Queen. He watched as Johnson talked about the bodies piling high. He obviously felt disgusted by it. But again, one has to presume he stayed there because there was a goal in sight that he thought was more important than all of the stuff he was witnessing. There was an end in sight that made him feel it was his duty to sit on his hands and stay silent while thousands of us died, while the bodies did indeed pile high. But he had his eye on a bigger prize. I don't know what it was. Reform of the civil service, introduction of sexy new technologies. I don't know. I can't wade through his interminable blogs to find out what his wet dreams consist of. But there was clearly some goal, some prize, so glittering that it enabled him to sit on his hands while this went on around him. And now, here we are, trying to make sense of how a man who completely denigrated truth is now expecting us not only to accept his truth, which is evidence-based, no one's disputing that it's true, the bulk of it, not even Downing Street, but what does he expect us to do with it in this world that he built? That's the bit that I utterly, and I've got to be honest with you, I'm engrossed by this question. I'm not just intrigued by it, I'm engrossed by it. And for the millionth time in the last 5 years, I wish I was studying this at university instead of having to live through it with you. 11:39 is the time. And while we're talking about undiluted madness, how come Roger the Raver is allowed to go out tonight and lick as many faces as he wants, despite the fact he's never had a vaccine in his life, but come September the 1st, he won't be allowed through the doors of the club unless he can prove he's had both doses? 03456060973. Jerry's in Surbiton. Jerry, what do you reckon?
Good morning, James. Great show as always.
It's all right.
Right, Roger,
Yes.
at the moment, hasn't got a chance to get double jab. So if you say you have to prove you're double jabbed, he'll go, that's not fair, it's discrimination because we can't do it. So the government have pretty much said, by September, you would have had your chance to get double jabbed. But in the meantime, we're going to let you go in and kiss each other's faces for now. But September comes, game over, 2 jabs.
No, yeah, you're right. Obviously, you're right. But why have they opened the clubs?
Because I think that age bracket is the ones that use the clubs anyway. So if you
No.
people,
Hang on, turn the question. I want to get this clear because you're absolutely right, but it's because my question hasn't been clear enough.
Okay.
So what I need to understand is why in September it will be government policy not to let Roger the Raver through the door, presumably for health and safety reasons, right? Unless he's had 2 jabs.
Yeah.
So why are they open now?
Because then you're discriminating against the clubs. If all the West End theatres...
But they've been shut for 15 months, mate. I mean, just another 6 weeks is barely going to make any difference whatsoever. So if they've decided it's not safe to let these kids into clubs unless they've been double jabbed, why not keep the clubs shut until September when you quite rightly explain they will have had an opportunity to get double jabbed? Why open them before they've had the opportunity if the policy that follows fast upon it is the one that proves they don't think it's safe to have them in there unjabbed?
Maybe the clubs will then say, that's not fair because everything else is open and why are you discriminating against us because it's mostly young people that come in there.
Yeah, that might be part of the reason, but it doesn't address the central inquiry, which is...
I still think it's stupid. I think it's obviously... it's really stupid.
But they're doing... they're doing the cost-benefit ratio. They're saying, all right, let's open up a few Petri dishes, doesn't matter how many people get infected, and then come September, we'll lock the stable door.
Yeah, well, they did that at Christmas as well, didn't they? So...
I mean, I'm not having a go because I haven't got a better answer than yours. And obviously you're 52% right, but the 48% that's not answered, you've provided 52% of the answer. You're not 48% wrong. There's 48% of the answer missing because the 48% of the answer needs to make some sense of the idea that the policy is being introduced in September because it will not be safe to have unvaccinated clubbers licking each other's faces. I might stop saying that now. People are probably preparing their lunch. That's going to be the case in September. So how can it be unsafe to have unvaccinated clubbers strutting their funky stuff in September, but it's perfectly safe for unvaccinated clubbers to strut their funky stuff today?
Well, they made a big mistake opening up on Monday completely. They shouldn't have done that. I think they should have just eased it
in. Like when you're opening your fizzy pop and you let a bit of gas out, you tighten the lid down again, and you let it all settle, and you open your lid again, all of that. Apologies for the sound effects. Terry's in Newham. Take care, Jerry. From Jerry to Terry.
It's Perry.
No, it isn't. Is it?
Yeah, it's Perry with a P.
So I thought it was Jerry to Terry, but really it's Perry.
Yes, that's right.
I must apologise. I think my phone operator's a bit merry.
That's okay. Big fan, by the way. My theory is... Terry's a big fan as well, so I hear. But my theory is that the government want to allow the virus to move around, to increase through the under 30s, because they want to move to a position of herd immunity, which via a mix of mass vaccination and natural immunity via previous infection. They see the under 30s as being less at risk of serious illness and hospitalisation and deaths. And if they build up the nation's herd immunity to a position where come the autumn, they will avoid a fourth wave that might coincide with an increase in influenza.
So they want clubbers to catch it.
yes, because then, look what Dominic Cummings has been saying. That's the desire. It's all the older people are just collateral damage, whereas if they see that it goes through a population of people that are not likely to get ill and end up in hospital, then they will achieve their goal of herd immunity via mass vaccination and
with a side order of naturally occurring antibodies. But then,
yes.
But then, that's a really strong answer, actually, Perry.
Thank you.
Well, because just
and
in
by that time, they will know that they can then by September there'll be more supplies online. People will then have got the idea that you get vaccinated. Alternatively, they don't need to get it because I've had it. So it's for their.
Well, no, but if they're in the second category, they can't go out. They can't go clubbing. So that's the only fly in the ointment of your theory.
No, but then they know if they want to go out, they have to get it. Simple as that. And then it builds up more people getting vaccinated.
But why not announce now? Well, keep the clubs shut. Announce now that they're hang on, let me finish. Announce now that they're going to open in September. Make sure the vaccinations are available and tell them that they won't be allowed in come September unless they've been double jabbed. That would be safer.
Yes, it might be safer, but it doesn't tie in what Johnson is about, isn't he? He's a sort of a right-wing libertarian. He's a sort of his real boss is the Telegraph and the right wing of his party, Steve Baker, who are all pressed in for everything to open up.
Yeah. If
he hadn't opened up on the 19th, he would have lost all credibility and support from that faction of his party that he relies on for support.
If it was Thursday afternoon, I'd give you a round of applause, Perry, at this point. That's a strike. I think that fits the facts as they are available at the moment better than almost anything else we've heard. So it is a calculated risk with the health of however many people are going to be going to clubs at the moment. Because I can't see any other answer to the second bit of the question, as in the timing of it, rather than the contradicting policies. And they are just, whether or not they're hoping that the antibodies come to play a part, I do not know. But certainly the explanation as to why they've done it now, despite the fact that come September you won't be allowed to do it, is a way to appease Brexit hardman Steve Baker and his weirdo mates, while also seeing some money go over the counters of the nightclubs, which is great. And on the other side of the scales, you've got the possibility of thousands of people getting long COVID. You've got the possibility of hospitalisations and deaths, although much, much, much diminished. And I'm thinking more of the people that will catch it from the people who've been in the clubs, the older vaccinated friends and colleagues and family members. And so that's the calculation. The people who go to clubs are going to catch it. The more vulnerable people they pass it on to are much less vulnerable than they were before the vaccination programme unfolded. And the only bit of the jigsaw that's missing is then why they'd bother introducing it in September. Because we're all better off if the more young people get vaccinated, the better off we all are anyway. So you can start rebalancing the scales a bit after it's gone through the clubbing community like a dose of salts. And then everybody's back on an even keel, an evenish keel. Cool, blimey, I think he's gone and done it. Patrick's in Nottingham to steer us back to the clubbing question and the vaccines themselves rather than perhaps the passports. What's going on?
Hi, James. Thanks. Thanks for getting me through the last 5 years, frankly.
Oh, lovely thing to say. You're very welcome, Patrick.
Bit of a steward's inquiry. I know you like the last explanation.
Perry, not Terry.
I think the governments are, they're reactionary, aren't they? They just react to whatever's happening right now rather than have a decent plan. And they announced the timetable. They announced the plan of step. And back in June, they said, we're not quite at this step yet. We'll delay another 4 weeks, but that'll be the last time we ever delay. And then we're in the last step and we're all done.
Yes.
And at that point, vaccinations dropped off a cliff.
Did they? You've got that back. You've seen that, have you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I know they've slowed, but I wasn't sure of the.
Right. Yeah. Yes, really, really slowed from almost exactly the time at which they said, okay, it's not this date, because it wasn't a date really, was it? It was a full step. But then it suddenly became 4 weeks from now. And we were all getting vaccinated because there was no other way out. That was the carrot to get us out of lockdown. And then they said, right, lockdown ends here, or all restrictions end here. Sorry, lockdown's rubbish. And all of a sudden, the young kids who hadn't got vaccinated went, well, I don't need to get vaccinated then. So now they're all out, they're all doing their thing, and the government see this videos of people having fun, and they go, we need another stick. We need another stick, and we need another carrot. So they say, right...
But then why... again, I think with previous questions...
They can't get them vaccinated.
No, but why open the clubs now, then?
They made that four-week promise. They got rid of the health secretary. They found somebody who would agree to it. They understand that if they don't unlock at some point over the summer, there's going to be a dreadful health crisis in the winter and through the spring, as flu and COVID both hit the people who are only...
okay, that works.
80%, 90% effective, then even the vaccinated can get it.
Yeah.
And if that coincides with the flu...
No, I understand that. That makes sense. But final question, why won't they just explain it that clearly?
Oh.
No, I mean it. Why won't they just explain it that clearly?
Give me a minute. Probably because...
You haven't got a minute. I'm late for the news.
Yeah, all right. Because they won't admit that the kids have stopped getting vaccinated. I mean, that was...
As a result of their...
Too many eyes.
Yeah, there we go.
At those numbers.
Well played. I think this is one of those days, and obviously as somebody who is not overburdened with modesty, I never quite enjoy saying this out loud. This is one of the days where the callers are knocking me sideways with the quality of their contributions. I'll up my game after this.
Psycho killer, qu'est-ce que c'est? Fa 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 fa. Better run, 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 run away. Oh, psycho killer.